The TV was so loud the windows were practically vibrating. Old cartoon music blasted through the apartment, while my boyfriend's father sat on the couch, glaring at the screen like he wanted to destroy it with his bare hands. And honestly, good. Because after weeks of cleaning up after a man who treated women like servants, after weeks of swallowing my anger inside my own home, I finally snapped. A few years ago, my boyfriend Daniel and I rented a tiny second-floor apartment in Manchester, but it was ours. After years of unstable living situations and awful roommates, that apartment felt peaceful, at least until Daniel's father moved in temporarily after suffering a stroke. Now, this wasn't some misunderstood old man. Richard had spent decades treating people horribly, especially women. His wife had never even been allowed to learn to drive because, according to him, women don't need independence. He expected meals brought to him, laundry done for him, boots removed for him. Daniel felt guilty about his father's condition, so he asked if Richard could stay with us for a few weeks while rotating between relatives. At first, Richard acted controlled, almost polite. Then the little thing started. I'd come home from work and find dirty mugs sitting in the middle of the table, crumbs everywhere, half-eaten toast left on plates. The sink was 5 steps away. 5. Whenever Daniel was home, Richard magically cleaned up after himself. But whenever I was alone, the mess returned, leaving muddy shoes on freshly cleaned floors, turning the TV volume absurdly high while I worked remotely, ignoring me when I spoke, then suddenly becoming charming the second Daniel entered the room. It felt deliberate, like he was testing how much disrespect I'd tolerate before reacting. One evening I finally said very calmly, "Richard, could you please put your dishes in the sink when you're done?" He didn't even look away from the television, just shrugged and said, "I figured you'd get them." Daniel immediately stepped in. "Dad, stop. Put your dishes away." Richard sighed dramatically, grabbed the plate, and slammed it into the sink hard enough to splash water everywhere. After that, the passive aggression got worse. If I vacuumed, he'd stomp through with dirty shoes. If I cleaned the counters, he'd leave crumbs behind. If I cooked dinner, he'd criticize it like a bitter restaurant reviewer. "This chicken's dry. Too much salt." My wife made this better. The worst part wasn't the mess. It was the atmosphere. You know that feeling when someone enters a room and your body automatically tenses? That became my normal life. I'd sit in my car after work staring at the apartment building, mentally preparing myself to go inside. Daniel saw it happening, but toxic parents have a way of turning grown adults back into nervous children. Then came the fire alarm incident. I was finally out with co-workers one evening, actually relaxing for the first time in weeks, when my phone exploded with calls. 7 missed calls, 10, 15, voicemails, texts, panic, emergency. Call me now. My heart dropped. I genuinely thought someone was dying. I rushed outside and called back. Richard answered. In the background, beep, beep, the smoke detector battery. That was emergency. He said the sound was stressing him out and needed me to come fix it immediately. I stood there in freezing rain staring into traffic in disbelief, but I still went home. After trying to fix it for half an hour, I realized the battery needed replacing. I finally asked, "So there was no actual emergency?" And Richard looked me dead in the eye and said, "I just didn't want to sit alone with the noise." That sentence changed something inside me, because suddenly I understood. This wasn't helplessness. It was control. He wanted attention, service, obedience, and I was done giving it. Then came the final straw. One afternoon, Daniel was at work, and Richard left garbage spread across the table again, cans, crumbs, paper towels. I ignored it. An hour later, he sighed loudly from the couch and said, "Are you planning to clean that? Not could you. Not would you mind." Planning to. Like it was my assigned responsibility. Something cold settled in my chest. I walked over to the TV, picked up the remote, turned on an old Looney Tunes marathon, and cranked the volume to maximum. Bugs Bunny screaming echoed to the apartment like chaos itself. Richard jolted upright. "What the hell is this?" I smiled. "Oh, I figure if I can't relax comfortably in my own home, maybe nobody should. Then I grabbed my keys and left. I stayed gone for hours. Coffee, shopping, bookstore. Meanwhile, that cartoon madness blasted through the apartment the entire time. When I finally got home, Richard looked furious. But the apartment? Spotless. Dishes cleaned. Trash gone. Table wiped down. Amazing how capable he suddenly became. That night, Daniel asked what happened. And for the first time, I told him everything. The manipulation, the tension, the exhaustion, the resentment building every single day. Halfway through, my voice started shaking because I realized how miserable I'd become trying to keep peace for everyone else. Daniel went quiet for a long time, then finally said, "You shouldn't have had to live like that." The next morning, he spoke privately with his father. I don't know exactly what was said, but afterward, Richard walked into the kitchen carrying his bags. No apology, no accountability, just bitterness. Before leaving, he looked at me and muttered, "You turned my son against me." And that sentence proved everything. Because in his mind, Daniel was an adult making his own decisions. He was property, control, authority. I looked him straight in the eye and calmly replied, "No, you did that yourself." Then he walked out, and the silence afterward, it felt unreal. No tension, no stomping, no criticism. For the first time in months, my home finally felt like home again. The loud TV wasn't the real revenge. That was just the spark. The real revenge was finally refusing to tolerate behavior everyone else had spent decades excusing. Richard expected another woman to quietly serve him forever. Instead, he lost access to the last place people were still willing to help him. And once manipulation stopped working, he had nothing left. Some people confuse keeping the peace with silently accepting disrespect. But peace built on fear and exhaustion isn't peace at all. Sometimes the most important boundary you'll ever set is deciding your comfort matters too.